fine. So can we? All right. Good morning, everyone. Yes, my name is Sonwabo from CPUT, from a Center for Innovative Educational Technologies, and I'll be presenting on the use of learning analytics to identify at-risk students at CPUT. All right. So basically. Okay, so this is basically what I will cover. All right, I'll explain what learning analytics is, what are the predictor variables or the measures that we use to identify students at risk, and also from which information systems do we collect the data to actually get this information, and also what system have we used to actually measure or to actually analyze the data. And also what is important, the context. So basically, that's how I'll run my workshop. All right. So before I can explain what learning analytics is, right, I do have a lot of text in there. Usually we don't do that. Before I explain what learning analytics is, I'd like to explain the problem first. What was the problem before we actually identify learning analytics as a solution? So basically what we did is we looked at what the business has been doing or what industry has done so far. All right. For an example, if you look at a situation whereby you'd go to Pick and Pay, you buy something and you get out without anyone knowing, you're just a customer. Whereas when you go to a bank, you are a client, then they have the information for you, right? You have a profile. So what they did, what business did, what Pick and Pay or Clicks did, they actually created smart shoppers to identify you so that you have a profile, and then whatever groceries you make, then they can actually identify from that to say that Sonwabo is buying this and this and this, so that next time there's a special on something, you can be sent an email or a message to say that there's a special on this and this and that. So we took the same concept and put it in learning analytics, whereby we said that we do have profiles of students from application, registration, learning, which is the LMS, and everything. So why can't we make use of the same concept in terms of identifying students at risk using that data? So that's the concept behind learning analytics, all right? Hence that statement there on top. So Ferguson explained learning analytics as a measurement, collection, and reporting of data, right? So I've highlighted those bold because that's basically how I'm gonna unpack our learning analytic journey. So we use a system, we call it learning for analytics for learn, sorry, A for L. All right. So if I were to start with the measures, all right, just go back there. So the first thing is the measurements. So if I were to start with the measurements, if you look at that, what are the key measures for students at risk academic failure? If you look at literature, there's quite a lot of information that you find in there. There's so many predictor variables or measures that you can use. All right. And you find that most of the time they're more of American style. You cannot identify with them. So even though that we identify the whole lot, we had to contextualize those so that they fit the CPUT students, all right? And also fitting with the CPUT student, we need to actually drill in terms of the institution itself, also within the faculties, departments, and down to the student, the actual student. So the focus is more student-centered and based on their learn activities, all right? So what you look in here, what you see in here, there's two things: the student at risk, and then the student who face conditions that threaten their potential to survive or to graduate or to pass their modules, all right? So what we found out, those are the main 4 things. There's quite a lot than this, but I just had to just put those who have not accessed the institutional LMS. So if a student has not yet accessed the institutional LMS, when this within half, you are 2 months far in, and then you notice that the student has not even logged in, whereas you have your content in there, your assessments in there, you have your tasks in there, you have your assignments in there, but the student has not accessed, then you know that the student might be at risk. All right. So what you also need to know that the risk factors might not really be true when you contextualize them. For an example, if a student has not accessed the or let's say, for an example, those who missed deadlines, meaning that the student has not yet submitted the assignment, All right. However, the student was able to go and shove the assignment underneath your door as a lecture. This means that the student does have means, but it was not able to submit online because it does not have a smartphone or smart whatever gadget that they need, or it does have a smartphone, but it did not have data to actually upload. So there are certain things that you need to look at. So what you see in data is not always true. So you need to actually have an understanding of those things. And also things that linguistic barriers, whereby the students are not actually, English is the second language or third language. It might be a barrier when you teach your class, whereby the student might not necessarily understand what you're saying. But if they were taught in different language, or if someone could explain the same thing in different language, they might actually understand the concept. So those are the things that you must acknowledge. Students staying on campus against those who stay off campus. All right, literature will tell you that students staying on campus, they have greater chances of passing. History has shown that most of them, they pass well, but at the same time, someone else can come in and say, now, what about those who stay on campus, but they are not well fed? They are hungry. You cannot teach a hungry child. So it means that now, if you find someone who stays 60 kilometers away from campus, comes in late because he stays far, but he's well fed. So those are the questions that you need to ask yourself as a lecturer or as a student, that if I'm using this predictor variable, this measure, what are the consequences based on the context of South African higher education students? All right. So there's quite a lot that you can discover, but what is most important is that you use the four quadrant. All right. You use active, participating, inactive, not performing, active, and performing. And then you have inactive and not performing. So those are the four things that you actually focus on. All right. So a student might be active on the LMS, but not performing. When you look at the grades, they're not performing. But a student cannot be active on the LMS, but somehow the student is progressing, is performing. Student may be inactive and not performing, but we cannot assume that because that he's not active is the reason why he's not performing. So those are the four quadrants that you need to focus on when you try to identify students at risk. All right. So that is if you want to look at the measured. What about the collection? What systems do we use? All right. If you look at the systems that I have here, but it's not limited to this. I have the LMS, Learning Management System, for the learn activities. I have the ERP, Enterprise Resource Planner. I have the Student Information System, SIS. I have the Marks Administration System. So the idea is to make sure that you integrate all those systems into one database, so that there's a system called the Learning Analytics System that can actually filter that information so that you can use it to what you want. All right, especially with the predictor variables, or what we call the measures. Then you can use all those systems. You can add more systems that you would like, depending on what you want to identify. If, say, for an example, there's something that requires the student to go to the library, to have visited the library within this week or this month, then you need a system from the library to say that, to tell you that the student did indeed go to the library. But what about those students who have a library in their hands, whereby they can just log into the database and then just go to get the articles that they need? So those are the things that you need to make sure, and those are the things that we've been trying to look into. All right. So those are the systems that we use to actually integrate everything, and also bearing in mind the four quadrants. All right. So what systems what is the system that we use to actually analyze the data? We use what we call the Power BI, which is the BI office from Microsoft. All right. So the Power BI, it is cloud hosted platform. It's a business analysis services, and it gives insights and visuals of what we want to establish. All right. So it's a standalone system, but they are able to actually take it and weave it in so that you use it as a filter of all the variables of the data that you have in all your information systems of the university. right? So we've been using this, but now the problem with this, and also the nice thing is that the system itself, it's able to clean the data first, all right? It cleans the data, it transforms the data, it shapes the data, all right? So for someone who does not have any know-how, I'm not a data specialist, the people that I work with are not data specialists, so we had to hire a data specialist. All right. Fortunately, we use Blackboard as a learning management system, so we got someone from Blackboard. All right. So basically, this is the system that we use. So once you logged into the system, you can always go back and actually measure based by designing a model that you want. For an example, here's a simple model, a correlation chart whereby it's looking at courses accessed and the student rates, all right? Minutes versus student grade. Interaction versus student grade. But if you look at these models, you find that there's a simple, very simple model. But we needed something more complicated, something that we can actually say that if a student doing this and this and this and this, then the student is at risk of this and this and this. So we wanted to create something called predictive analytics. So based on the current situation, this is what we predict will happen to the student and actually quickly offer support. So the idea of learning analytics is to predict now. We're at this stage whereby we try to predict and then actually offer intervention based on those predictions. All right. So what were the challenges that we, the other thing about learning analytics is that when you click on any of those models that we've built, you can actually identify, for an example, this is average learn grade by course and the minutes per quartile. So we have all our faculties there. Now what I did is I click on the health and wellness faculty to see that's one data there on top. Here at the bottom, then it shows you it says grilled in to the actual departments, which is biomedical and nursing. If I were to click on nursing more, then it will get me to another level whereby I'll go to the actual module to say maybe patient preparation as a module. Then you click on that and then it goes a level down again to a student. So it gives you a holistic view of what's happening. However, now maybe I'll mention this when I mention some of the challenges. So when we look at the challenges now, the first challenge we had was the ethical issue. All right. So the ethical consideration on the use of student data. All right. So the first thing was that for each and every data that we collect, the students must give consent. For each and every data, when a student logs into the LMS, when a student logs into the application, when it's information system, when a student logs into any system, they must get that page that says, I'm so-and-so, give consent that this data can be used. All right. So what we did is we called also someone I'd like to call an ethics specialist, Prof. Prinsloo, to come in and actually guide us, where he spoke about the big R and the small r, in terms of what do we need consent for or what don't we necessarily need consent for, and also the legalities. All right. So now, when I speak of legalities, is in the sense that now when a student, for an example, let me go back to the example I made about Pick n Pay. If my mother or my sister or my girlfriend or all three of them, within 1 week, they send me to go buy something for them that I don't really use, it means that now Pick n Pay will assume that I'm a frequent buyer of that product. So the next time there's a special on that product, then they'll send me a message to say you can buy one or get one free. So now there's an option to opt out of that, to say, can you stop with these messages, or I don't want the messages anymore. So this was an idea whereby also with the student, if you actually send an email to say, I've realized that you have not logged into the LMS for like 2 weeks and already we have an assignment, we already have content in there, we already have a quizzes to do. So the student, if it's not a problem, then the student can opt out can decide to opt out. But the discussion that we had was that now, if you know as a lecturer that the student decides to opt out, that's fine. But if you know as a lecturer that the student has opted out, but yet you know that the student is going to fail, the prediction says that now the student, chances are, there's greater chances that the student is going to fail. And if a student fails, then it means that you knew. So legally you needed to act on some because you knew. But ethically, the student did not want your interventions. So those are the heated discussions that we had. When does legal becomes unethical or vice versa? All right. And also learning analytics helping to form basis of the learning sciences. How can we weave it in so that it actually focuses on the student's journey? Their learning paths, student learning paths are different. So how can we make use of learning analytics to make sure that the data guides us into those paths and the students are learning the way that they're comfortable with, the options that they have. Development of analytics related to student needs, like I said, student-centered, not anything else. You will have those researchers, you will have those tutors or student support staff who will come in and say, I want data for this. You will have staff who will come in and say, I want to prove A, B, C, and D, or I want to use this in my ad hominem promotion, so I need to have evidence. But we need to focus on student-related issues, all right? Development of models to inform and support student learning needs from integrated institutional information system. That's basically one of the things that we had a problem with, but we are now getting hold of it, all right? So basically now, what's happening is now because we don't want simple models, we have complicated models. What we did is we asked the guys from BI to actually create something, a platform that will allow us to gather information from these different, to build from one model that will identify so many things. For an example, I'll give you a simple example. This is from literature. Someone said that if a students who come from low socioeconomic background are at risk of failing based on these predictor variables. A black male comes from a second average high school, is on financial aid. So those are the great chances that the student will not succeed. So we need to be able to run such a model to test it and see that those who have, say for an example, if it's a model for those who are at risk of being expelled. So to run that and see if the student really, maybe from last year, that the student with these features or with these measures have actually failed or dropped out. So there are so many things that we can run with this new model platform that we're going to use. So they call it Pyramid 18. All right. So it's very interesting because we need to make sure that these things, they actually work. We need to test them. So we've developed a model already to test it, but we just now need to make use of the software. So basically what is important now is that you also need a theory to guide your inquiry, because if you take it at face value to just say student who did not log in are at risk, or student who did not submit online are at risk, whereas we know that within South Africa, especially UWC or CPUT student, we know that if a lecturer posts something online, if it's an assignment, one student can download that and disseminate that. So the rest of the student does not necessarily need that to log in. So it's more of a ceremonial act. However, now when we look at learning analytics, we might not see that because we're looking at the actual facts. So we need a model or a theory to guide us as to what we need to do. So we chose, because we're looking at student at risk, and student at risk of failing, student at risk of dropping out of university. So we use Tinto's longitudinal model of dropout. All right. So according to the model, it looks at the individual and academic, social, and academic and social of the university during which a person's experience in those systems continually modify his goal or institutional commitment in ways that lead to persistence or varying form of drop out. All right. So this model provides an actual knowledge of the whole process. What are the signs? What are the different types of risk? When does it happen? All right. So you'll find that there are different types of models that you can use. The students, there's also the survival analysis model that actually can do the same thing, but the survival analysis just shows you exactly when the student will drop out, for an example, or when the student will fail. So it focuses on the actual dates. All right. You can use the Cox hazard as well. That says that now if this happens, then it is a hazard that the student might end up doing this. All right. So if a student does not submit maybe or performs less, does not perform well in test 1 and test 2, the chances are the student will fail. All right. And there's great information whereby it says if a student participate in the discussion forum, it's a good identifier that the student will pass well. All right. And also sometimes you find that with learning analytics, people focus mainly on the bad stuff. Say for example, if you look at the grades, if a student gets less than 50%, then he's at risk on the grade. Whereas now you might find that you have a student that is an A student. Immediately that student becomes a B student. They freak out, they don't associate themselves as a B students, and then they might just drop out. Can you see now how everything, the risk factor became something there on top without you having to see that the student. But now if your projections are saying that, if your criteria are saying that now student less than 50%, then you won't be able to pick up those students whose performance is deteriorating, because that student is still sitting on 70 something and 60 something. Doesn't make sense. So you need a learning module. You need information systems. You need a system to measure, and then you need to build a model. But that model need to be carried out by a theory to guide what you want to do. So that's basically our story at CPET. So I think I'll take questions later on, not now. All right. This is just a schema that shows what happens.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.